All right. I'm going to read you a story. Walk in the park. It was dark. Not late, only 9:30, but very dark. I decided to walk home. It would be scary. I knew that. I wanted that. That was the whole point. October was winding down. Almost time for Halloween. This was my favorite season. The time of cool nights and falling leaves. A time to try and recapture the thrills and chills that came so easy when I was a boy. A time to be scared. No better way to start things off than a night walk through the park. I had my phone, that modern security blanket we all carry, but the charge showed only a hair-thin sliver of red. Perfect. A sign near the path read one way. The arrow pointed back in the direction I'd come. It wasn't, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." But I tried to take it as a bad omen. Fear doesn't come easy to a white middle-class guy in his 40s. Worry, sure. Cancer, money problems, my kids. I could worry most people under the table. But what I wanted was fear. I had to coax it. I conjured up the scariest thing I could imagine. For me, it was a child. A blood-drenched child sitting on a swing. Not in the giant well-lit wooden play area full of seesaws and monkey bars. The bigger swing set, further up the park slope all by itself. The child swung slowly back and forth, staring over its shoulder to where I stood on the path. Every parent's nightmare, an innocent violated. Or maybe something else. Something feral and dangerous, considering its next victim. Horrible? Yeah. And effective. Goose flesh sprung up all along my arms. The image dissipated as quickly as it came. It was too Hollywood, right out of A Nightmare on Elm Street. But the fear lingered. I didn't have to reach for dread anymore. The night took over the job. The park was full of the kind of trees whose bark peels away in strips, exposing pale wood the color of yellowed teeth. The leaves were dry, and they gave the wind a harsh, rasping voice. There were streetlights, but only a few. I had to cross through pools of ink-dark shadow to get from one to the next. My back tingled. Why? Because there was someone behind me. At least, that's what I half believed. Was there really? I didn't know. I couldn't look back. If you look back, that's when those footsteps, the extra ones, the ones you keep telling yourself are echoes, speed into a run. The rasping wind whispered its threats, and tree branches reached toward me with the languid slow motion of undersea plants. Every object more than 10 feet away grew ominous. The shapes just indistinct enough to allow my mind to play with them, to form them into things befitting the occasion. My flesh crawled. It's a weird sensation. Some people go their whole life without ever experiencing it. It really does feel like your skin is moving. A slow wave of tightening derma, creeping up the nape of your neck on its way to the top of your skull. I walked faster, letting out a pent-up breath each time I reached the false safety of the next light. To my left, down a steep grass-covered slope, I heard the distinct hyena laughter of teenagers. The red eyes of their cigarettes stared up at me from dark silhouettes. I was almost out now. I walked through shadows toward the last of the park's lights. Damn it, it was too soon. I wanted the feeling to go on at least a little longer. Just let me be that kid again, shaking under the blanket, knowing despite what my mom told me, the boogeyman did exist. He was huge and twisted, had claws and sharp teeth, and he was right there beside me. I stepped into the light. People were coming down the path. A man my age. He could have been me. Dark hair, balding, but not succumbing to a comb-over yet. His wife, a stout woman with the same dark hair, accompanied him. A tall boy with a crew cut completed the nuclear family. The solid, boring reality of them, of me, ripped through my carefully crafted dread. I hated them a little. I hated the fact that I'd grown up and lost some of myself along the way. I wanted to yell, "Boo!" and run into the night, laughing maniacally. But, of course, I didn't. Instead, I nodded at the dad. Evening. He gave a response, raised his hand to cover up a yawn. I only half heard his words. I was too wrapped up in my own thoughts. Finally, I strode out of the park onto the sidewalk proper. All in all, the walk had been exactly what I needed. I turned and looked back. The family of 3 was there, but they were stepping off the pathway, out of the light, heading down the dark slope where the cigarette-smoking teenagers had laughed. They moved differently now, hunched over, their arms hanging low at their sides. There was something wrong with their heads. The backs of their skulls had grown huge as prize-winning pumpkins. Their faces were steep slopes, leading down to lantern-sized jaws. As I stared, the man looked back over his shoulder, his head turning farther and farther until I expected to hear the snap of bones. Our eyes locked, and just before the shadows took him, he smiled. I saw that smile, and my stomach dropped, as if I'd gone over the first big hill on a roller coaster and just never stopped falling. What had he said to me on the path before yawning and covering up his mouth? You should always cover your mouth when you yawn. It's the polite thing to do. Or maybe because you don't want anyone to see all those needle-sharp teeth, at least not until later when you smile. I'd heard him, I just couldn't recall the words. I'd been too busy trying to hang on to those last tendrils of false fear. A scream rose from the park, and another. There was a shouted obscenity, the voice high and broken. Then the cries were cut short, the way a strong hand smothers a bell. That silence was my trigger. Finally got what I wanted. The pure terror of childhood filled me, hot, huge, and beyond any doubt. I hadn't lost the feeling after all. A younger, wiser me had walled it away. I'd replaced it over the years with a nostalgia-drenched cartoon version of dread, but the real staying thing was still there, screaming behind the bricks, clawing at itself, waiting to be set free. I ran. The house was still 3 blocks away. How long before the man and his family finished with the teenagers? My flesh crawled again, my skin beaded with goosebumps. I remembered now what the man had said on the well-lit path before he stepped into shadows and became something else. I wanted to forget those words. I wanted to go back to being a grown-up, where I was in control and being scared was a once-a-year novelty. But my childhood fear was free at last, and it howled the man's words like some demented mantra. See you soon. See you soon. See you soon.